Hello everyone, welcome to the Departamento Loratorum. My name is Max, and today I'd like to talk to you about Chaos. Over the last few months, I've made videos on Chaos Space Marine Warbands, who are devoted to each of the 4 different gods of Chaos, but are not members of the Legion typically associated with that god, to provide some extra options and flavor when you're creating your army. So I've decided to compile them all into one video, with some added corrections, in order for you to get your Chaos fix all in one place. I am also working on a longer video that requires a bit more research. That should hopefully be out next week, so look forward to that soon. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that I recently created a Patreon and also added memberships to the channel. You can get access to some cool perks like members-only polls, shoutouts and videos, thank you to Wolfrey, Grubus, and Error404 for joining, and early access to all my videos. I also have a poll running on Patreon where you can vote on a Space Marine chapter for me to cover, so be sure to cast your vote. Of course, there's no obligation to join, but if you enjoy my content, please check it out. Now, without any further ado, let's get started with some Slaaneshi warbands. Hello everyone, welcome to the Departamento Loratorum. My name is Max, and today I'd like to talk to you about Slaanesh. As many of you know, the Emperor's Children are all set to arrive as a full faction in Warhammer 40k, with pre-orders starting soon. I'm sure many of you, like me, are eagerly anticipating getting your hands on those beautiful new models, painting them up, and creating your own army. Today, I'd like to try and provide some more unique ideas on how you can create your own Emperor's Children warband. Kind of. While the faction is named Emperor's Children, and they are the primary Slaanesh-worshipping Chaos Space Marines we see in the Warhammer 40k universe, they are not the only devotees of the Dark Prince among the forces of the traitor Astartes. Other Chaos Space Marine warbands serve the Prince of Pleasure, and you may decide that you'd rather start an army based on one of them instead of the Emperor's Children, either because you find their lore more interesting, prefer their paint scheme, or just want the additional freedom to make your own dudes. Games Workshop used to have alternative color schemes and example warbands and codices to help with this exact thing and make the universe feel more fleshed out. They seem to have been moving away from this in 10th edition, which is a shame, and I hope they do go back. But fortunately, there's nothing stopping you from painting your models the way that you want to. I do also want to say that there is nothing wrong with choosing to just make an Emperor's Children warband if that's what you want to do. There's still plenty of variation that you can do with that, and, they're still a very cool faction even just on their own. But in the spirit of Slaanesh, I think we should have more options. Today I will be going through 6 examples to provide you with options and inspiration. I would like to say before we get started though that this is not an exhaustive dive into each warband, both so this video is not a massive slog, and also because historically Slaanesh has been underrepresented compared to the other gods. For someone like Khorne, say, we would have a lot more information on his warbands. This makes some sense as Games Workshop is trying to sell this game to kids, and Slaanesh may not be appropriate for children in some ways. Thankfully, Games Workshop seems to be moving more in the direction of making Slaanesh the god of excess, instead of focusing just on the physical pleasures, hopefully allowing them to do more and more varied stories with them. But without any further ado, let's begin with one of the oldest warbands on this list, the Violators. The Violators were introduced all the way back in 3rd edition, in the second Chaos Space Marine Codex released for that edition. They also managed to appear in the book Demon World, with a group of them under a Chaos Dreadnought named Commander Demetrius, serving under the Slaaneshi ruler of the titular demon world, Torvendus. They also fought in the 13th Black Crusade, participating in the capture of the penal world of St. Josmain's Hope, and drawing recruits from penal worlds across the Cadian sector. The Violators' bodies are mutated and altered, leaking a purple-gray fluid that stains their armor. They also often scar their bodies in devotion to Slaanesh, and will wear their armor at all times, the idea of showing their body considered a sacrilege, unless it is to a worthy champion of Slaanesh, or to a powerful foe they have defeated and are about to kill. Their color scheme is a bit more basic, dark blue with a silver trim, and their symbol is a cross, dagger, and lightning bolt. Unfortunately, they have not been seen much in recent 40k lore. They could be the faction for you if you want to revive them, or if you enjoy Hellbrutes, as they were led by a Chaos Dreadnought. Mixing in some Penal Legion-themed cultists might also be interesting. Let's now move on to a faction that is obsessed with punishing others instead of themselves. The Punishers. The Punishers are almost exclusively known for their rivalry with a chapter of Space Marines called the Dark Hunters, almost destroying them in the First Punisher War in 825 M41, until they were defeated by a coalition of chapters aiding the Dark Hunters. They have since clashed with the Dark Hunters many other times, as detailed in the book Dark Hunters, Umbra Sumnus. as well as joining Typhus in the Charadon campaign in M42, assaulting the Forge world of Metallica. The Punishers appear to be a powerful warband, almost wiping out the Dark Hunters on their own homeworld, needing elements of 6 other chapters to drive them off, as well as having access to Emperor-class battleships. We don't know all that much about their culture or beliefs, save that they serve Slaanesh and hate the Dark Hunters. This can be a negative or a positive, as it gives you less of a sense of who they are exactly, but also allows you to make up some of your own headcanon. Punishers have bone-colored armor with brass trim and black bones drawn directly onto their armor. They would be an excellent choice if someone in your playgroup already has or is thinking of starting a Dark Hunters-themed army, or if you just want a framework to create your own specific headcanon. While the Punishers make use of bones as armor decoration, let's move on to another warband who prefers to use them in a more visceral way: the Corpus Brethren. The Corpus Brethren were introduced in the 6th edition Chaos Codex, being part of the ill-fated Abyssal Crusade. This was a crusade into the Eye of Terror, performed by 30 Space Marine chapters called the Judged, in 321 M37. They were convinced of their perceived corruption by the Imperial Saint, Basilius, who sent them into the Eye of Terror in order to cleanse themselves. He later turned out to be a traitor, with this being a ploy in order to create more Chaos Space Marine forces. The Sentinels, one of the chapters in the Judge, entered the Eye of Terror and fought on a demon world called Oliensis. This world was made up of a giant obese man curled into a ball, and beastmen and noise marines lived on him, dwelling inside his massive pores. When the Sentinels landed, they fought against the beastmen before being ambushed by noise marines. This awakened Oliensis, who decided to devour the Sentinels and noise marines whole. It is unknown exactly what occurred to the Sentinels inside of Oliensis, save that they had to turn to cannibalism in order to survive. When they managed to escape, they had been corrupted into a cannibalistic Slaanesh-worshipping warband called the Corpus Brethren. The Corpus Brethren have unfortunately not been seen outside of the 6th and 8th edition Chaos Codices, although we do know that the Marines in the warband have names and titles like the Feaster in the Twilight and the Gnawing Brute. Pretty metal if you ask me. They also have a beautiful color scheme of white armor and bronze trim, probably my favorite of all the warbands we're going to see. I think some flayed skin or gore effects would really pop on them. I just think they would be so beautiful. This is another warband where you really have more of a framework for the lore to build up in your own head. You do have some interesting names and titles, as well as a, frankly, pretty cool backstory. It may also be interesting to add in some Slaanesh-themed beastmen, or some bits from the Flesh Eater courts in Age of Sigmar. But maybe you're like Batman and want to see if it comes in black instead. Which brings us to our next warband, the Children of Torment. The Children of Torment are a sub-faction within the Black Legion, made up of Slaanesh worshippers. The history of the Black Legion as a whole is too long to get into here, but to summarize, they're followers of Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos. Devoted to winning the long war against the Imperium at any cost, they will accept anyone, from any background, who agrees to serve Abaddon and help overthrow the hated Corpse Emperor. The Black Legion as a whole are featured in many Warhammer books, but if you'd like to learn about their foundation and history, I'd recommend the Black Legion series by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. You can even see that one of the founding members was a former Emperor's Children. The book Renegades, Lord of Excess, also features an Emperor's Children warband who actually broke away from the Children of Torment. As mentioned previously, the Children of Torment are made up of Slaanesh-worshipping Marines, including many former Emperor's Children. They are often looked down upon by the Emperor's Children as traitors to Fulgrim and lapdogs of Abaddon. This could lead to some interesting conflict, especially if maybe your friend is thinking of picking up an Emperor's Children army as well. They may also be a good option if you were thinking of starting both a Chaos Space Marine and Emperor's Children army. It also might be a good thing for kit bashers, as mixing in some regular Chaos Space Marine and Emperor's Children parts would look pretty cool. Their armor is mostly the Black Legion black and gold color scheme, although with a little pink mixed in sometimes. Although if you're a fan of pink armor, this next warband is definitely the one for you. The Flawless Host. The Flawless Host are probably the most well-known warband on this list. Since their introduction in the 4th edition, they've appeared in many lore blurbs and codices in White Dwarves, as well as appearing in short stories, like The Judges in their Hunger and Honor and Wrath. They were originally a chapter called the Shining Blades, known for their purity, mental training, and many victories. As you probably guessed, this led to them developing quite an ego, and resulted in them eventually turning traitor in the Beryllia Massacre in 498 M34, slaughtering everyone they could find after their magnificence was supposedly questioned. For the following century, they scoured the entire area, getting into conflict with various loyalist chapters, including the Red Scorpions. They raided one of the Red Scorpions' strike cruisers, stealing their gene seed. In response, the Red Scorpions scoured the entire area and destroyed the Flawless Host's asteroid base in the region. This defeat led the Flawless Host to declare vengeance against the Red Scorpions for tarnishing their glory. Since then, they have become devoted to Slaanesh, making use of many combat drugs and in conquering Imperial worlds to enforce their own version of perfection. They fought in the Fifth Black Crusade, the War of Beasts, and allied with Fabius Bile to fight in the Pariah Crusade. They also conquered the feudal world of Novaris, enslaving the population to produce weapons before the newly founded Silver Templars chapter liberated it during the early 42nd millennia and took it as their homeworld. These two factions have developed a rivalry since, especially considering the Templars' first captain Ducas slew a Lord of the Flawless Host, Lyria's Soulslaver, during the battle. As stated before, the Flawless Host is one of the more popular Slaanesh warbands in 40k other than the Emperor's Children, with their pink and purple color scheme really making them stand out. The new Emperor's Children models seem made for a scheme like this, and given this warband's popularity, I wouldn't be surprised if they got a shout out in the new codex. If a friend has a Silver Templars army, I'd say this is a no-brainer choice for a warband. They may also be a good choice if you want your faction in that sweet spot between having a good amount of lore, but not so much that it feels overwhelming. But if you prefer a bit more anarchy and freedom, this final warband may be the one for you. The Hedonistarii. The Hedonistarii are a piratical group of Slaaneshi Marines who raid the Eastern Fringe. They were introduced in the 8th edition Chaos Space Marine Codex, and, due to this recent introduction, have relatively little lore and have not appeared since that codex, unfortunately. But we do know that they revel in war for its own sake, always trying to spread anarchy and tear down law and order wherever they go. They also have an alliance with a Chaos Lord named Drethoni, who is also an anarchist with large Helldrake Ares, presumably giving them access to those demon engines. This is another warband where, appropriately, you have more freedom to make your own headcanon, although they do provide a framework of piracy to work in, as well as access to sweet demon engines. Their color scheme is purple with a bronze trim. So there are the 6 warbands, but it wouldn't be Slaanesh if we didn't go a bit beyond. I'd like to also mention the Angels of Ecstasy, a warband that we know nothing about save their color scheme and general design, and that they used to be a chapter called the Sons of Ulthunas, and that they turned traitor in something called the Ganymedean Betrayal. While their design certainly looks Slaaneshi, we don't have any confirmation of this. Hi everyone, Editing Max here. So this is actually wrong, but I did not find out till later that there is more information on the Angels of Ecstasy available. I did include that in a future video, and I am going to add that content in here, so because I'm a big dumb idiot, you guys will get some extra Slaanesh content. Enjoy. The Angels of Ecstasy. Now, longtime viewers of this series may actually remember that I actually mentioned the Angels of Ecstasy in the first video in this series on Slaaneshi warbands. I said that we had no information on them other than their name and design, and this is not actually true. I apologize for the mistake. I learned after that video, from a Mishmash kitbashing video linked in the description on the warband, that they actually made one other appearance. Mishmash is fantastic, by the way, great kitbashing videos, and you should definitely give them a watch. The Angels of Ecstasy starred in a short story called A Song for the Lost by Robbie McNiven. I will be spoiling this story for the rest of the section, so if you don't want spoilers, feel free to skip to the end, or better yet, go read the story and then come back. It's only like 25 pages. Originally a loyalist chapter known as the Sons of Ulthunas, the Angels of Ecstasy turned to Slaanesh worship thanks to the corrupting influence of their chapter master, and later Chaos Lord, Ullix the Enthralled. Before being taken by the chapter to become a Space Marine, Ullix was a novitiate in an Imperial cathedral, and was often punished by the cruel bishop for forgetting his hymns. His only comfort came from Sister Decay, a mysterious woman who taught him prayers and sung him to sleep every night. Her song stayed in Ullix's mind at all times, even managing to survive the hypno-indoctrination needed to become a Space Marine. Eventually, sometime in late M41, it drove him to lead his brethren to slaughter 10 billion souls in an event known as the Ganymedean Betrayal, resulting in the chapter fully embracing Slaanesh. Ullix's obsession with hearing Decay sing her song again led him to seek out and capture Eldari to bring to her aboard the warband's flagship, the Praise Eternal. Decay was, of course, a Slaaneshi demon, and she would sing her song for Ullix once more as the unfortunate Eldari prisoner was tortured and killed by her fellow demons. While they mostly appear to be a fairly standard Slaaneshi warband, the Angels of Ecstasy make heavy use of noise marines, who are constantly singing and are invigorated by new sounds, such as the shrieks of the Eldar's howling banshee aspect warriors. The warband also includes a few possessed marines, including Ullix's lieutenant, Equus the Anointed, who disapproves of Ullix's obsession and wishes to take command of the warband for himself. The Angels of Ecstasy wear pale pink armor with black trim, and their symbol is a black Slaaneshi rune. While the warband doesn't have a ton of lore, there is enough for you to get a feel for them and how they think and act. You could do a lot of interesting stuff with Ullix and his obsession, or with a warband led by a potential rogue lieutenant. They're also a good choice if you're a fan of noise marines, and if there are a lot of Eldari armies in your playgroup, they'd be a pretty good pick. I do again apologize for missing the Angels of Ecstasy in my Emperor's Children video. Warhammer is a huge setting with a ton of lore, and sometimes stuff falls through the cracks. If I ever do miss anything in the future, please let me know and I'll be happy to issue a correction. Wow, wasn't that fun? Aren't the Angels of Ecstasy just a bunch of little scamps? Alright, now back to your regularly scheduled programming. But that does bring me to an important final point. You can always take an existing warband with no or very little lore and make it your own, or of course just make up your own original warband. Like an existing name or color scheme, make a Slaanesh splinter faction of that warband. Want to make a group of word bearers who summon demons to appease the Dark Prince? Feel free. Make your own group of traveling noise marines who want to share their music with the galaxy, whether they're willing or not, or a group of gourmands searching for the perfect ingredients for their great feast to honor Slaanesh. An idea I've actually come up with for my own Slaanesh-themed warband is a former penitent Space Marine chapter who discovered the potential pleasures in pain and want to share that with the rest of the galaxy. Being the god of excess in all its forms, Slaanesh has endless possibilities for you to build your own dudes around. Hopefully the warbands that I've mentioned here today can help provide some inspiration for that. I'd also like to recommend a couple of books that can give you some more inspiration for what to do with your own Slaanesh warband. These books do focus on the Emperor's Children, but they go into the different motivations behind why Chaos Space Marines may follow Slaanesh. These are the aforementioned Renegade's Lord of Excess, which really dives into the different goals and ways that different Slaanesh Marines might serve, or view as the best way to serve Slaanesh. I'd also like to recommend the Fabius Bile trilogy as a whole. While Fabius himself is no longer really a member of the Emperor's Children and doesn't recognize the Chaos Gods at all, Emperor's Children Marines are important secondary characters throughout all the books, and their different perspectives are explored. These are the books that actually got me interested in Emperor's Children, so I really would recommend them. I hope that you found this informative. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video and comment any suggestions for future videos down below. Also, if this made you want to start any of these warbands, I'd love to hear it. My next video is going to be on orcs, and either should be out next week or the week after. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye. Hello everyone, welcome to the Departmento Loratorum. My name is Max, and today I'd like to talk to you about Khorne. With a new combat patrol and codex on the horizon for World Eaters, a lot of new players will probably be starting an army of them soon. And, while the World Eaters themselves are a perfectly good horde of screaming berserkers to base your army around, over the years Games Workshop has made plenty of other warbands who are devoted to the Blood God without being Sons of Angron themselves. You may find yourself drawn to one of these more minor warbands, or wanting to create your own custom one, because you want more freedom to create your own lore, enjoy the playstyle or units they focus on, or just prefer the color scheme. Although fair warning, the Khornate warbands still use a lot of red. These warbands could also work equally well for a Khornate-themed Chaos Space Marine army as a World Eaters one, so even other Chaos players should find plenty of interesting lore and ideas here. I've done a couple of these videos now, but the goal of them is to highlight lesser-known warbands in the lore and help provide you with more options for your army theming. Games Workshop used to like creating these little minor warbands and adding them into codices to show off alternate pate schemes and flesh out the world. Recently, they seem to be focusing more on warbands from the 9 original Traitor Legions, which is fine, but does kind of make the universe feel smaller. There is, of course, nothing wrong with choosing to base your army on the World Eaters or one of their subgroups. They are still cool. There's a reason they're one of the most iconic parts of the setting, after all. We'll be looking at 8 different warbands in this video in order to please Khorne. This is also just going to be a summary of these warbands, giving you the general information about them and any highlights, and letting you decide if they're right for you without getting bogged down in every minute detail. But without any further ado, let's get started with a look at one of the most famous non-World Eaters warbands, the Skulltakers. Originally a Loyalist chapter known as the Berserkers of Caradon, they became reborn as the Skulltakers sometime between M34 and M39, when contact between them and the Imperium was lost. At some point in those intervening 5,000 years, the chapter fell to chaos, devoting themselves to the blood god Khorne, although to be fair, naming a chapter the Berserkers of Caradon is kind of asking for this to happen. Since then, the Skulltakers have raided across the galaxy, their fleet led by the Styx-class heavy cruiser Blood Dawn, acting as fairly traditional Khornate berserkers, swinging chain axes and taking skulls. They have come into conflict with the Iron Knights chapter at the Battle of the Telamon Cloud, taking part in the 13th Black Crusade and Kalarkos Blood Crusade, and a group of them even joined the Iron Warrior's warsmith Hansu in his invasion of Ultramar. But by far their most significant involvement was in the Siege of Vrax. Prior to the conflict, the Chaos Lord Zhufor the Impaler had taken over leadership of the warband. A former sergeant of the Stormlords chapter named Balzac, he was captured in battle with the World Eaters on the high world of Paramar, and drugged, tortured, and surgically altered until he became a raving berserker. He went on to rise in power and status, eventually subjugating and gaining command of the Skulltakers, and offering his service to Abaddon the Despoiler in order to gain control of an even larger army. He and the Skulltakers joined the conflict on Vrax in its final years, possibly on the Orders of Abaddon in order to disrupt the Imperium. He then set about assaulting the Imperials, leading his men from the front against the Death Corps of Krieg, killing a Lord Commissar and taking his body as a trophy, as well as trying to become the most powerful Chaos Warlord on the planet. He killed the Lord of the Berserkers of Skalathrax and absorbed the survivors into his warband, seized control of the forces of Chaos from the nominal leader, Apostate Cardinal Zaffin, and Lord Arcos the Faithless of the Alpha Legion, and succeeded in summoning a horde of demons led by the bloodthirster Angrath the Unbound to the planet to combat the advancing Imperial forces, turning it into a true blood-soaked tribute to Khorne. But despite this onslaught, the Imperium managed to retake the planet with the aid of the Grey Knights and Lord Inquisitor Hector Rex, who managed to personally defeat and banish Angrath. Zulfor and his surviving Skulltakers were not defeated, however, using the warp portal the demonic army arrived through to leave Vrax, escaping Imperial retribution to fight another day. As stated previously, the Skulltakers act as a fairly standard Khornate warband, although they do maintain a unique unit of skilled and vicious Terminator-armored bodyguards for Zulfor the Impaler called the Blood Cult. The Skulltakers wear copper armor with silver or brass trim, it changes depending on the artwork, and are said to use the powdered bones of their enemies to polish their armor. Their symbol is a silver chain axe on red. As Siege of Vrax participants, the Skulltakers are one of the most famous individual warbands on this list, and have a decent amount of lore and attention. They don't have anything really unique going on with their backstory or organization, fighting exactly like you'd expect Khorne-devoted Chaos Space Marines to fight, but they can act as a good alternative if you want to play a more traditional Khorne army, but also want the freedom to do something different from the standard World Eater's backstory and characters. They'd also be good for you if you just want to paint with more metallics, which is a fun way to paint up your Chaos Space Marines if you've never tried it. This next army, as well as several others on this list, comes from the 7th edition Khorne Demonkin Codex. That codex provided lore and rules for Khornate Space Marines to fight alongside the demons of the Blood God, so it's the perfect source for ideas going into this new 10th edition World Eaters Codex that's doing the same thing. Especially since most of the warbands in that codex, including this next one, had some really interesting ideas. The Harvest. When Khornate warbands come across a fortress, they will usually simply throw themselves at the walls, trying to force a breach in order to let the real bloodshed begin. Not the Harvest. They prefer to cast themselves as the defenders in siege warfare. But they don't build fortresses, that would take time away from the killing. No, instead they find a fortification in the path of some major invasion, and, using masses of warp talons to create a warp rift in the middle of it, invade it while the defenders are distracted by the incoming threat. They will then massacre the defenders and consecrate the fortress with their blood before taking their places to face the invasion themselves. The Harvest are known for wiping out the Black Ravens chapter in 946 M41, opening a blood portal in the middle of their fortress monastery and killing every last loyalist inside. They then use the defense lasers to destroy the Black Raven's fleet, dropping the Void Shields and preparing to face an incoming tendril of High Fleet Behemoth in order to bring glory to the Blood God. The Harvest are also known to have taken part in the 13th Black Crusade, and are led by their Chaos Lord Revax the Cruel. Their color scheme is dark red with bone white trim, which is matched by the demons that accompany them. The Harvest have perhaps the most fun concept and theming of any of the warbands on this list. I don't know who came up with the idea of invading a fortress just to take it over and defend it yourself, but they're a genius and deserve a raise. This concept is a great framework to build your army around, but also still provides a lot of freedom for different playstyles and for creating your own characters and lore. If your playgroup enjoys playing with a lot of fortress terrain, or if you wanted to use more siege weapons in your army, then they're a great pick. They unfortunately don't have a ton of lore or appearances, and that is a shame given how interesting their whole deal is. Let's follow them up with a look at a warband that prefers to be out in the battlefield, not behind walls. The Blood Wolves. Originally of the Space Wolves chapter, the Blood Wolves were formed when the Wolf Lord Svein Wulfbad became disgusted by the inefficiencies of the Imperium and led the warriors of his great company into the service of the Blood God Khorne, going on to slay many Imperial citizens to gain the favor of his fell master. In 913 M41, Great Wolf Logan Grimnar tasked Wolf Lord Harold Deathwolf and his great company with tracking down Svein and the Blood Wolves and putting an end to them. Harold and his company tracked the Blood Wolves to the stormy moon of Galamus in the Cleiades system. Braving the dust storms, Harold, riding his trusty Thunderwolf, led a strike force of wolf scouts to the planet. They hunted for weeks, suffering many losses due to ambushes from the Chaos Space Marines and their demon and mutant allies. But eventually Harold managed to track Svein to the top of a mountain, interrupting a ritual where he was trying to summon demons to help wipe out the strike force. Svein and Harold dueled, with Svein even managing to wound Harold's Thunderwolf, but the Space Wolf at last gained the upper hand. As Harold swung his axe in for the killing blow, a bolt of lightning came from the heavens and struck the champions. Afterwards, Svein was gone, only his frost axe remaining, a shard of which is now part of Harold's Thunderwolf's cybernetic jaw. It is unknown what happened to Svein and any surviving Blood Wolves, but they could still be out there, plotting their revenge. This story and the Blood Wolves themselves appeared in White Dwarf 387, with their cool bronze color scheme created by Christian Byrne. Svain Wulfvad had originally appeared in the 4th edition Chaos Space Marine Codex, providing this quote illustrating why Space Marines might turn to Chaos over the failing Imperium. As such, the Blood Wolves don't have as much cultural lore as the other warbands on this list, although Traitor Space Wolf Berserkers is an interesting enough concept on its own, but they show you how you can take an existing chapter you enjoy and spin off a group of them into a Khornate army. Chapters like the Black Templars, Blood Angels and their descendants, or Executioners would work well for this, although given that all Space Marines are warriors, you can find a convincing reason for any of them to embrace Khorne if you try. If your friend has a Space Wolf army, they would also make cool rivals, especially if they have a Herald Death Wolf in their army. And if you wanted to make use of Space Wolf bits in your Chaos forces, especially with their updates, they'd be a great choice for that too. This next warband is from the 7th edition Demon King Codex, and they are another group of former loyalists who fell to the Blood God's embrace. The Brazen Beasts. Originally members of the Golden Blades chapter, in M37 they were part of a garrison of the Fortress of Intolerance on the planet Gahala. During a demonic invasion, they were struck by a strange madness and began defacing their vehicles with arcane symbols and using bloody rituals to bind the demonic forces assaulting them into their war machines, becoming the Brazen Beasts warband. Since then, they have begun to worship a group of Khornate demons known as the Gore Thunder Cohort, who make heavy use of skull cannons and soul grinders to destroy their enemies. The Brazen Beasts have followed suit, using masses of demon engines such as Defilers, Forge Fiends, and Mauler Fiends to rip and blast their foes to shreds. Transporting their stable of demon engines from warzone to warzone aboard their Space Hulk, the Oblivion Shadow, they maintain a coven of enslaved warpsmiths to keep their mechanical beasts placated and ready for combat. The warband's prized possession is a Lord of Skulls known as the Caged God, which they worship as an idol of Khorne. The Caged God's visions guide the Brazen Beasts, helping deliver them to more victims for the slaughter. The Brazen Beasts have taken part in the 13th Black Crusade, assisted in the destruction of the Deathwatch Watch Fortress of Ebon Vale, fought in the War of Beast and the Caradon campaign, and even wiped out a minor Xenos race known as the Goresh, so they've definitely been keeping busy. Their armor is the color of bloody brass, except for red helms and pauldrons, and they have dark gold trim. If you like demon engines, the Brazen Beasts are definitely for you. You can enjoy playing with hordes of skull cannons, Mauler Fiends, Helldrakes, and if you like kit bashing, you could probably fancy up an amazing Lord of Skulls as your centerpiece to represent the Caged God. And given that the World Eater's range has a surprising number of demon engines in it, these guys should fit right in. But now let's move on to a warband who prefer to let their demons run free. The Sanctified. At the end of the Horus Heresy, most of the traitor legions fled into the relative safety of the Eye of Terror, but some commanders refused the order to retreat. One such commander was Helman Brish of the Word Bearers. He and his men remained in real space, continuing their crusade against the Imperium. Brish was killed sometime in M32, but his followers remained loyal to his cause, and recruited other zealous marines from warbands they came across. At some point they devoted themselves to Khorne, using their heretical knowledge to summon his demons into the Materium to spill blood and claim skulls. The Sanctified have an uncanny ability to locate isolated new colonies and explorator fleets on the fringes of the galaxy and primarily prey on them. The Sanctified have come into conflict with the Fire Angels chapter, fighting against them on the Cemetery Worlds and the Grand Al Ghul system. Sorcerer Lord Ezrath Kull was attempting to use the remains of deceased Imperial heroes in a ritual to ascend to demonhood. However, through the actions and sacrifices of the Fire Angels, including the deaths of their chapter master and chief librarian, the Sanctified were defeated and forced to retreat, with Kull later being killed by an ambitious lieutenant for his failure. They also famously took part in the Siege of Vrax, battling against the Death Corps and joining forces with the Skulltakers. They were the ones who opened the warp portal that allowed Angrath the Unbound to be summoned. Their exact fate is unknown, but given that Zufar and his Skulltakers escaped through the warp portal, and the Sanctified are known to later take part in the Nakman Rift War, it can be assumed that they did the same. The color scheme for the Sanctified has changed over the years. The Siege of Vrax books gave them a Wordbearers-inspired dark red with silver trim look, but in the 4th edition Chaos Space Marine Codex they were a lighter red, with black helmets and palms, and yellow ritual lines around the neck. I think the older scheme is much more distinct, but probably hard to do for a whole army, so maybe save that for special characters and do most of the Marines in their newer colors. Their symbol is a flaming mark of Khorne. The Sanctified are a great choice if you enjoy mixing mortals and demons in your army, especially since 10th edition is adding Khornate demons into the new codex. I feel like Possessed or 8-bound would fit in well, and if you enjoy both Khorne and the Wordbearers, they would be a great choice. Also, if a friend has a Fire Angels army, you could play up a rivalry with them. That would be pretty fun. Now let's move on to another warband from one of the traitor legions, the Hounds of Abaddon. The Black Legion, followers of the Warmaster Abaddon, take on recruits from all of the other traitorous legions and warbands devoted to the Dark Gods. These recruits usually group into subunits within the Black Legion, banding together with other Marines based on similar combat styles or devotion to a god of chaos. The Hounds of Abaddon are one such warband, formed from some of the most brutal, blood-hungry devotees to Khorne within the Legion. They naturally revel in close combat, charging right into their foes with chain axes and lightning claws. Led by a Chaos Lord with the title of Lord Ravager, commander of the Black Fleet, the Hounds of Abaddon will naturally often partake in boarding actions on enemy vessels. The Lord Ravager of the Black Legion was Urkrathos before he ascended to demonhood and then was banished by Saint Celestine during the destruction of Cadia. Since then, Threxos Hellbreed, a warrior noted for his skill in boarding operations, has taken the title. While Urkrathos claimed lordship over all the followers of Khorne in the Black Legion, other independent Khornate warbands exist under Abaddon's direct control, such as the former World Eater's captain and founding member of the Black Legion, Lahorvine Ukris, and the Riven, a group of possessed Space Marines under another World Eater, Delvarus. But the Hounds remain the premier Khornate faction within the Legion. The Hounds of Abaddon use the Black Legion's black and gold color scheme, often with some added red armor plates, to show their devotion to the Blood God. If you wanted to start an army that could easily be played using both the Chaos Space Marine and World Eater's codices, or expand an existing Black Legion army into Khorne, the Hounds of Abaddon are the choice for you. They, and the other god-marked Black Legion warbands, are certainly one of the most lore-friendly and cost-effective ways to play Chaos as a whole. The Hounds of Abaddon, and the other Khornate characters in the Black Legion, have also appeared in many Black Library novels, like the Black Legion series and the books The Fall of Cadia and The Red Path. So they'd be a good choice if you wanted to pick an army with some decent lore and a good chance that they'd have more written about them sometime soon. Now let's move on from a warband within a Chaos Undivided Legion to one that has a much more contentious relationship with the other Chaos gods. The Bloodgorged. Another creation of the 7th edition Demonkin Codex, the Bloodgorged are known for their intense hatred of the other Chaos gods and their followers. They see worshippers of Tzeentch, Slaanesh, and Nurgle as blind fools, and can think of no greater offerings to Khorne than their skulls. They will routinely attack the fleets and armies devoted to the other Chaos gods, even when they're already in combat with Imperial or Xenos forces, offering praise to Khorne with the gory anarchy it brings. The warband also maintains many cults throughout the galaxy, in order to disrupt their rivals and prepare for the arrival of the Bloodgorged. The warband maintains a base of operations in the Golgotha system of the Ultima Segmentum. The system is home to a stellar anomaly known as the Skull Star, an enormous solar body, somehow shaped like a grinning skull. While most other spacefarers avoid the area, as it is said that the Skull Star is able to drive you mad with hatred, the Bloodgorged embrace it as a manifestation of Khorne's holy wrath, and have fortified the worlds of the system, turning them into holy citadels from which they can set out on their bloody crusades. Over the centuries, the Bloodgorged have crossed blades with many foes, ambushing and destroying an Emperor's Children fleet in 138 M41, accidentally saving an Imperial world of Pyros in the process. They made up for this in 992 M41, by killing everyone on the hive world of Falcat, after Inquisitor Bastapol Harg destroyed one of their cults on the planet. They have also drawn the ire of Huron Blackheart and the Red Corsairs by attacking some of their strongholds, causing a years-long war between the two groups, and managed to wipe out a Grey Knights Brotherhood on Hyrak II with the assistance of a demonic horde. And, like most other Chaos warbands, they heeded the War Master's call, taking part in the 13th Black Crusade. Their color scheme is red and brass with gunmetal armor trim. If you're in a playgroup that includes several other Chaos armies, the Bloodgorged will be a great pick to face off against your friends. They also seem to make heavy use of cultists, so if you enjoy cultist models, they'd be a good choice too. And while this applies to all of the warbands on this list, I feel that these guys would look really good using Blades of Khorne models from AOS, or Corpse Grinder cultists from Necromunda to represent those cultists, or as bits for kit bashing. I like the Jackal models just fine, but more variety is always better. Let's finish off with one of the largest and most widespread of the warbands devoted to the Blood God, the Skullsworn. First appearing in the Khorne Demonkin Codex, the Skullsworn are an impressively large warband, numbering in the thousands due to swearing their allegiance to the demonic legions led by the infamous Skulltaker, Herald of Khorne himself. This larger size has necessitated that the warband split itself into smaller, constantly feuding bands, spreading themselves across the galaxy in order to shed blood for the Blood God and gather skulls for the Skull Throne. It is said in the Scriptures of Slaughter that only the Blood God's roar itself can unite the Skullsworn, and that such an event would usher in an age of endless carnage. As such, an entire Ordo Malleus conclave have devoted themselves to making sure that this can never come to pass. The Skullsworn were founded in M33 by the Chaos Lord Barkor the Bloody, who took the Holy Scriptures of Slaughter from the Infernal Maze and created the first Skullsworn warband. He led them for over 100 years, wiping out the populations of over a dozen planets before ascending to demonhood on Ossador II. 7 times in the history of the galaxy have the Skullsworn risen up in an unholy crusade, fighting until all of the mortal warriors had fallen, replaced by demons, and marking their names in the pages of history in blood. Each time another iteration of the Skullsworn rose up to take their place, and this incarnation, the 8th, is said to be attempting to summon an entire demonic legion into real space. As you'd expect from such a large and prolific warband, the Skullsworn have been involved in many conflicts over the millennia. They assaulted the hive world of Rebas in M40, facing off against 100 Astra Militarum regiments. Despite suffering heavy losses, the Skullsworn managed to destroy 88 of those regiments, causing the 8 surviving berserkers to ascend into demon princes, going on to kill every other living being on the planet, leaving only a mountain of skulls behind. They have also fought the Emperor's children under the control of a demon known as the Silver Prince on the world of Hunter's Haven, and destroyed a force of Sisters of Battle from the Order of the Bloody Rose on the Shrine World of Idle. A champion of the Skullsworn was also captured by the Dark Eldar and brought to the fighting pits of Komarov for their amusement. Although it seems he got the last laugh when a bloodthirster burst from his chest mid-battle, causing a demonic incursion that destroyed an entire sub-realm of the city. They also took part in the, by this point, obligatory 13th Black Crusade. Their color scheme is mostly red, with brass helmets and trim. The Skullsworn are another great pick if you wanted to do a more traditional Khornate warband, but didn't want to play as the World Eaters. The fact that they have so many sub-warbands also makes them very customizable, an easy way to create the perfect group of your dudes. Their association with the Skulltaker would also make them a good choice if you enjoyed playing with him, especially given that he just recently starred in a Total War Warhammer DLC and has a pretty sick model. So those are all the Khornate warbands. There are more that I could cover, like the Wrath, the 8 Scarred, or the Slaughterkin, but I feel that these 8 show off the multiple different ways that you can create and flavor your own group of berserkers well enough. I will admit, I was shocked by just how much variety there was while researching this. I've always kind of seen Khorne and his followers as a one-trick pony, especially compared to some of the other Chaos Gods, but the writers have really done a lot with them over the years. There's plenty of good warbands to choose, or to use for ideas for your own custom warband. One of the things I love about Chaos and Warhammer 40k as a whole is just how much freedom you have to customize and make your army your own, and that's really exemplified by all of these different Khornate warbands. The one somewhat negative thing I will say is that there's not much variety in the color schemes. We've seen a whole lot of red and brass, which are the main colors of Khorne, but there's no reason we can't branch out a little bit. Think of how cool an all-silver or iron berserker would look, how fun it would be to paint a green and gold 8-bound, or how well white or bone armor would show off those bloodstains. I understand fully why some people like to use the pre-Heresy World Eaters colors, because at least they provide some variety. There's nothing wrong with the color schemes we do have. I always love a good red mini, but if the new codex adds some more unique color schemes, I definitely wouldn't complain. I hope that this video helped you decide on your World Eaters army. If you're looking for more ideas, I'd highly recommend the Khorne Demonkin Codex. It's a great source. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video, it really helps the channel, and comment below which of these warbands was your favorite, and if you'd like to see more of these videos exploring lesser known groups to base your army around. My next video should be on Nurgle, so look forward to that. For now, thank you and have a great day. Bye! Hello everyone, welcome to the Departmento Loratorum. My name is Max, and today I'd like to talk to you about Nurgle. With the 10th edition Death Guard Codex coming out soon, and a new combat patrol on the way to replace their horrible 9th edition one, this seems like a good time to think about theming and paint schemes for a Nurgle army. And while the Death Guard Legion, and the warbands that spawned off of them over the years, like Nurglings from a Great Unclean One, are the most iconic followers of the Plague God, they're not the only Space Marines in the Warhammer universe devoted to the spread of pestilence and decay. Over the years, Games Workshop has created several other Nurgle-aligned Chaos Space Marine warbands, and you may choose to pick one of them for your Nurgle army, either because you like their lore or color scheme, prefer the units or tactics that they focus on, or just want more freedom to create your own dudes. You may also choose to create your own custom warband, in which case you may still find the ideas used in these canon Chaos warbands helpful in coming up with your own unique lore. Of course, there is nothing wrong with sticking with the Death Guard for your army, especially considering that they have some very cool and unique theming. In fact, they're probably the most complete army out of any of the God-marked legions, with plenty of exclusive units and vehicles that really make them feel distinct. You can of course use those units in any of these armies, or you can just play them as Nurgle-themed Chaos Space Marines, or do both. Maybe even kit-bashing Chaos Space Marine and Death Guard kits to create the blend of the faction that works the best for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at 7 warbands, just like Papa Nurgle would want. This is just going to be an overview of each of them, going over their general lore and themes, and not a deep dive into each one. So without any further ado, let's get started with one of the most extreme examples on this list. The Purge. If you've ever looked at the Death Guard and thought, these guys are good and all, but they're just not psychotic enough for me, then it is my pleasure to introduce you to the Purge. Once a loyal Space Marine chapter, sometime in the 36th millennia they fell to chaos, despairing in the corruption of the galaxy and believing that only the death of every living being in it could bring about salvation. To that end, they engage in campaigns of extermination, making heavy use of chemical weaponry, such as keeping a version of the Life Eater virus in a glass ball called the Orb of Unlife, and pray for Nurgle to bring about a great plague to wipe the galaxy clean. The Purge happened to be one of the more prolific warbands on this list, taking part in many engagements over the millennia. On the world of Berigil Tertia, a group of them under Chaos Lord Dolothek drove a space hulk called the Hell's Last Duke into the surface, emerging from the wreckage to hunt down the survivors. The Purge were eventually defeated when the Fire Lords chapter arrived, using Centurion squads to assault the bridge of the Hell's Last Duke and kill Dolothek, leaving the warband leaderless. They were more successful on the agri-worlds of Belrua and Fealty II, infecting them with deadly spores by crashing their plague ships into the planet's surfaces. They also completely depopulated the world of Vaxhalia, killing 14 billion Imperial citizens in just 1 month. They also invaded the Iron Hands homeworld of Medusa alongside the Death Guard under Typhus and another warband on this list. They were eventually driven off by the combined might of the clan companies of the Iron Hands, but not before turning whole regions of the planet into blasted wastelands. They also took part in the Siege of Rax, which will be discussed more later on in the list. But the Imperium isn't the only faction of the galaxy, and given the Purge's desire to purge every living being from said galaxy, they've come into conflict with several Xenos races as well. They've attacked the Tau Sept world of Kelshan, taking advantage of its weakness after being invaded by both the Imperium and High Fleet Gorgon. They attempted to poison the planet's atmosphere in order to wipe out every Tau on the planet, but were foiled by the artificer Fio O'Shoan and his Remora drone fighters. They also joined the World Eaters in attacking the Greater Thurian League of the Leagues of Votan in the Galactic Core, near Warpstorm Orgviar, attacking the League's mining vehicles known as Harvester Fortresses on the world of Torg. Despite a successful counterattack led by Kal Uthar the Destined, that managed to rescue many valuable materials and kill the World Eater's Chaos Lord, the conflict remains ongoing. The Purge's color scheme is black and green, with the exact pattern differing depending on which piece of art you look at, and their symbol is 3 black flies in a position similar to the Mark of Nurgle. Introduced in the 4th edition Chaos Space Marine Codex, the Purge are one of the more popular warbands on this list, appearing relatively often in Codex lore blurbs both for Chaos and other factions, and it's easy to see why. The Purge exists in this sort of sweet spot for minor warbands, having an interesting theme that makes them stand out without being limiting. This makes them easy to make up lore for, both for the writers and for the players, so they'd work well for you if you wanted a more traditional Death Guard army, but also wanted the freedom to do something a bit different from the standard Death Guard backstory and characters. And, given that so many Nurgle units fit the chemical warfare theme, they can work well with many different playstyles and army compositions. Let's move on to a warband that focuses less on raw destructive power and more on survival. The Cleaved. First appearing in the 4th edition Chaos Space Marine Codex, the Cleaved are known for their incredible tolerance for punishment, even for traitorous Astartes, and the strange, oil-like blood that leaks from their armor joints. First appearing during the Magma Codelian insurrection, they were summoned by insurrectionist cultists to repel the 334th Iridian Astra Militarum Regiment, who had managed to push all the way into the rebel planetary governor's palace. But the sudden arrival of the Cleave took the guardsmen by surprise, with their near victory turned into a total loss, and the planet of Magma Cordelian ended up being lost to the Imperium. In 891 M39, they came into conflict with the Dark Angels chapter when the Sons of the Lion purged a space hulk they were occupying. The Cleaved also joined Typhus in the Purge in raiding the Iron Hands on Medusa, as well as assisting Typhus again in the Caradon campaign against the Forge world of Metallica. They also took part in the Caller-Cost Blood Crusade, a Khornate crusade following the path of the Keeler Comet, destroying every world in their way. Why they were present, despite being Nurgle worshippers, is unknown. It could be that they simply wanted to join in the fun, or it could be a mistake on the part of the Legion of the Damned, the book that depicted this event. Interestingly, this will not be the last Nurgle-Khorne connection on this list. The Cleaved have pale flesh-colored armor and trim, with black blood leaking out of the joints. Their symbol is 2 crossed black axes. The Cleaved are an interesting warband, acting as more of a blank slate for you to create your own lore and ideas. Their endurance and a connection with Khorne kind of lead me to imagine them as more of a melee-focused army, so they may be a good choice if you like the idea of that playstyle, but that is of course up to your own interpretation. If you had a friend who plays Iron Hands or Metallica, you could also play up a rivalry with them. I also really like their color scheme. It's fairly simple, but the black bloodstains add some character, and I feel like they would look really good with the obligatory Nurgle grime effects. And if you wanted another excuse to buy that bottle of streaking grime, this next warband is for you. The Bringers of Decay. The Black Legion will take in members from any legion or warband, as long as they pledge to serve Abaddon the Despoiler and fight the long war against the Imperium of Man. As such, one can find warriors devoted to all of the Chaos Gods among their ranks, either as individual members of squads, or grouped together into warbands under a devout Chaos Lord. The Bringers of Decay are one such group among the followers of the War Master. Staunch devotees of the Plague God, the Bringers of Decay are an influential warband within the Greater Legion, attracting many recruits to their diseased banner. Led by the Lord Corruptor, Cyrax Slaughterborn, one of 4 Chaos Lords known as the Chosen of Abaddon, the Bringers of Decay often act in advance of other Black Legion forces, spreading plagues and diseases to weaken the enemy. Like most worshippers of Nurgle, they appear repugnant to those who refuse to accept the embrace of the Lord of Decay. Other warbands within the Black Legion often shun them, although they will always find plenty of love from Papa Nurgle, of course. They took part in the 13th Black Crusade along with the rest of the Black Legion, fighting in the Diamor campaign under the Sorcerer Zorfus against the Blood Angels and the Skitarii and Titans of Forge World Metallica. The Bringers of Decay used the black and gold color scheme of the Black Legion with added green elements and a patina of rot and decay to show their allegiance to Nurgle. If you wanted an army that could easily be played using both Death Guard and Chaos Space Marine rules, or wanted to expand an existing Black Legion army to play Death Guard, the Bringers of Decay would be a great choice. They also demonstrate how you can create a Nurgle, or any individual Chaos God, theme section of pretty much any undivided legion in order to expand into that Chaos God's faction, or just as an excuse to buy some of their kits. It's obviously easier for a diverse group like the Black Legion, but there's nothing stopping you from making some Nurglite Iron Warriors or Night Lords in order to give yourself access to a whole other faction. While the previous warbands have been staunch followers of Nurgle, this next one has a much more interesting relationship with the Plague Father, the Deathmongers. Originally a Space Marine chapter known as the Brothers of the Anvil, the Deathmongers fell to chaos during the ill-fated Abyssal Crusade. In 321 M37, on the order of the Imperial Saint Basilius, 30 Space Marine chapters, deemed as corrupted by Warpstorm Dionys, were sent into the Eye of Terror on a penitent crusade, told to cleanse it of corruption or die trying. This ended up being a trap laid by Basilius, who was in fact himself corrupt, and most of the chapters sent into the Eye ended up falling to chaos. The Brothers of the Anvil were one such chapter. Captured by Dark Eldar on the Khorne world of Belial IV, they were taken to the Dark City of Kamara and thrown into the arenas. A year later, the survivors managed to escape, but they had been driven mad, becoming the Chaos Space Marine warband known as the Deathmongers. The Deathmongers are obsessed with death and destruction, killing every living thing they come across, sometimes even delaying or sacrificing the chance at victory just to cause more carnage. They are known to have fought in the Orphean War, as well as battling alongside the Warp Ghost warband at some point, sometimes being mistaken for them by outsiders. This is a reference to their first appearance in the 4th edition Chaos Space Marine Codex when the two groups shared a color scheme. While the Deathmongers' religious affiliation is unknown, their color scheme and symbol suggest that they worship Nurgle. This is not 100% confirmed, and some of their members have somewhat cornate titles like Blade-Fingered Lord of the Murderous Arts and Knife Fighter of the Deathmonger Slaughter Cult, but this is not a deal breaker. The Bringers of Decay, a confirmed Nurglite force, are led by a warrior named Cyrax Slaughterborn, so Nurgle worshippers can have cornate-sounding names. They could also be a warband made up of both Nurgle and Khorne worshippers. There is precedent for this, as the Broken, another Chaos army created by the Abyssal Crusade and appearing in the book Calgar's Fury, dedicated themselves to both the Lord of Blood and the Plague Father. The Deathmongers' color scheme is gray with dingy brass trim, and their symbol is 3 orbs in the shape of the Mark of Nurgle in front of a 5-pointed star. As we discussed previously, if you wanted to do a combo Khorne Nurgle warband, the Deathmongers would be a cool choice. And if your friend had a Dark Eldar army, you may also be able to play up some sort of rivalry with them. The Abyssal Crusade and the warbands that came out of it is also just a really interesting story, one I'd really like to do its own video on someday, so look forward to that in the future. This next warband is another veteran of the Abyssal Crusade, albeit with a much clearer allegiance to Nurgle. The Grey Death. A chapter formerly known as the Iron Drakes, the Grey Death's story begins during the Abyssal Crusade. After entering the Eye of Terror, the Iron Drake's fleet was crippled by a force of Death Guard Trader Marines, leaving them trapped on the plague world of Anethrax. The Iron Drakes fought against both the Plague Marines of the Death Guard and the planet itself, being assailed by living fungus trees that coughed and spewed filth on them. For a century, they fought a grueling war of attrition, with the Iron Drakes slowly being whittled down. While their armor systems protected them from the worst of the planet's corruption, once it was breached, even the superhuman constitution of a Space Marine couldn't save them. The Death Guard took advantage of this, always attempting to wound their targets or damage their equipment rather than kill them outright. Those unlucky enough to experience an armor breach soon found themselves turned into another one of the screaming fungus trees that covered the planet's surface. After 100 years of war, and with half of their number now part of the local flora, the Iron Drakes were worn down. In order to put an end to the hellish conflict, they swore themselves to the service of Nurgle, becoming reborn as the Grey Death. The Grey Death wear grey-green armor with black trim, and their symbol is a skull with a 3-pointed star behind it. While they have an extremely interesting origin story, there is unfortunately not a lot else known about the Grey Death. This does make them an excellent canvas if you want to create your own headcanons and fan lore for your dudes, but I do feel like GW could be doing a bit more with them. I feel that way about most of the warbands of the Abyssal Crusade, as I've said before. Kind of feels like a lot of them just got forgotten about right after their introduction. If you wanted to try out some kit bashing, you could play up the connection to the fungus trees on the world of Anethrax, maybe adding Sylvanath or some of the more natural-looking Nurgle bits to them, or using them as an excuse to include a feculent Gnarlmaw as part of your terrain. Let's go on to another warband of former loyalists who turned to Nurgle out of desperation, the Steel Cobras. Originally a loyalist chapter, the Steel Cobras were known for their worship of the Emperor of Man in the form of an animal totem. While the Emperor is worshipped in many forms by different planets and cultures across the Imperium, some puritanical priest will take issue with any customs they see as too far outside of the norm. The Steel Cobra's totem worship was deemed by one such overzealous cardinal to be heretical, prompting them to lead a crusade against the chapter. The Steel Cobras fled to the ice world of Tukaros 7, building a base beneath its ammonia seas to avoid Imperial reprisal. The Warband first appeared as an example color scheme in the second version of the 3rd edition Chaos Space Marine Codex, with their background expanded on in Index Astartes 4 in 2004. After that, they weren't seen again until 2019, when they were resurrected in a White Dwarf article as the Children of Blain, the creation of GW employee Alexandre Dumiard. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right, apologies if I'm not. While the Steel Cobras were in hiding on Tukaros 7, they were struck by a strange, chaotic storm. The warriors of the chapter were soon infected with unnatural, warp-spawn diseases and left weakened and dying. As the chapter lay crippled, a mysterious wanderer, the sorcerer Barcaron, arrived and offered Chapter Master Arcasus Blain a deal. He could save the Steel Cobras, but only if they swore their souls to Nurgle. Blain accepted, and the Steel Cobras were reborn as the Children of Blain, or Chilblains, a Nurgleite warband. The Steel Cobras and the Children of Blain both have a greenish-bronze color scheme, with the Children of Blain adding white panels to represent their rebirth as Plague Marines in the frozen seas of Tukaros 7. While you may not want to play as someone else's custom army, the Steel Cobras / Children of Blain show how you can take an existing warband with a little bit of lore or a color scheme you enjoy, and use them as a template to create your dudes. They're a great illustration of the kind of stuff I'm hoping these videos inspire you to do, and I really do hope GW continues to show off more examples like them in the future. Let's finish up with a look at this last warband and the Siege of Vrax. The Lords of Decay. Another warband from the Abyssal Crusade, formerly known as the Lances of Taros, the Lords of Decay fell into the Plague God's embrace through unknown means. Since then, however, they have appeared to have aligned themselves closely with the Death Guard, even having been led by the demon Primarch Mortarion on occasion. The Lords of Decay are known to be associated with the Space Hulk the Monolith of Woe, possibly using it as a base or as transportation. As of the end of the 41st millennia, they were being pursued by Imperial forces in the Mentieth sector. Their former first captain, Roga, led a force of them to the planet of Sturmgex Prime, intending to summon a horde of Nurgle demons, including the demon prince Anakir, and use the planet as a staging point for a Black Crusade. But the Lords of Decay and their demonic allies were defeated by the might of the entire First Brotherhood of the Grey Knights. They are most famous, however, for taking part in the Siege of Vrax. I do want to make a video going over the siege in the future, so I don't want to go into too much of it here right now, but in summary, the Siege of Vrax began when the Imperium sent the 88th Siege Army, made up of regiments of the Death Corps of Krieg, to besiege the armory world of Vrax. The planet had rebelled under the leadership of Cardinal Zaffin after the Ordo Hereticus attempted to assassinate him due to his growing popularity. Over the course of the conflict, the forces of Chaos infiltrated the Vraxian rebels, thanks to the influence of the Alpha Leech Underlord Arcos the Faithless and the traitorous Deacon Mammon. By the end of the conflict, 11 Chaos Space Marine warbands were involved in the fighting. 4 of these warbands, the Apostles of Contagion, the Tainted, the Purge, and the Lords of Decay, were servants of Nurgle. While we don't have many specifics of the Lords of Decay's actions on Vrax, it is known that the forces of Nurgle made heavy use of chemical weaponry, such as the dreaded TP3, as well as demonic allies and the forces of the Lost and the Damned, including Twisted Mutants, Chaos Spawn, and Plague Ogrins. While the Imperium eventually triumphed, Vrax was left desolate, its stores of weapons depleted, and its land poisoned, and it was quarantined by order of the Inquisition. Interestingly, all of the Nurgle warbands that took part in the Siege of Vrax are described by the Imperial armor books as Death Guard splinter factions. While this is true for the Tainted and the Apostles of Contagion, this contradicts other sources for the Purge and Lords of Decay. While this is most likely a simple mistake, you could always say it's an error by the Imperial scribe who compiled the information, if you wanted everything to work within canon. The Lords of Decay wear light gray armor covered in black, brown, or green stains, and their symbol is a red mark of Nurgle. The Siege of Vrax is one of the most interesting parts of 40k lore, so the Lords of Decay would be great for you if you wanted to have an army with a connection to that event, especially if you made use of some of the Forge World Death Guard and Nurgle models made for it. They're not as easy to find or work with as the modern plastic Death Guard kits, but they definitely have a lot of charm. The Lords of Decay have also come into conflict with the Grey Knights over the years, so they might be a good pick if you have a friend with a Grey Knights army that you want to fight against. So that's all of the Nurgle warbands. There were definitely some fun ones in there, and I really enjoyed reading about them and all the different ways that they serve the Plague Father. But as you can tell by the number of warbands that I introduced as being from the 3rd or 4th edition, you can see that GW has kind of gone away from creating these minor, non-First Legion warbands. Nurgle and Slaanesh have a few options that are relatively well fleshed out, and Khorne actually has a surprising number of options, but doing some preliminary research for the Tzeentch video, they have it really rough. I'm going to have to do some interesting stuff for that video, so stay tuned, it should be really fun. I do feel a lack of more of these minor warbands is a shame. They really do help the universe feel more alive and expansive, and that's always a good thing. When you start seeing the same 9 or 10 names show up in every war zone, it just makes the galaxy feel so small. And I hope that in 11th edition they decide to switch to factions focused around the Chaos Gods, like instead of Death Guard, it's, Nurgle. Instead of World Eaters, it's Khorne. It might give these secondary warbands and, hopefully, the demons more time to shine than they have been in these last few years. I hope that this video helped you decide on your Death Guard army or introduced you to a cool warband that you've never seen before. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video, it really helps the channel. And comment below which of these warbands was your favorite and if you'd like to see more of these videos exploring lesser known groups to base your army around. I will be doing the Tzeentch video soon, but my next video should be on something a little bit different, so stay tuned for that. For now, thank you and have a great day. Bye. Hello everyone, welcome to the Departamento Loratorum. My name is Max, and today I'd like to talk to you about Tzeentch. The 10th edition Codex for Thousand Suns has finally arrived, along with a new and improved combat patrol. This is a great time to start an army of the Sons of Magnus, and you may be looking for some inspiration. In this video, I'd like to show off some lesser known Tzeentchian warbands that you can base your army on. Now, before we get started, I have to tell you that this video is going to be a little different from the others in this series. I looked and just could not find many non-Thousand Sun Tzeentch-focused warbands with enough lore written on them to justify including in this video. I was only able to really find 3 with enough on them to fill out a section. This is probably due to the Thousand Suns aesthetic being very distinct. It's hard to make a non-Thousand Suns warband fit into it. And since they've been the main Tzeentch Chaos Marines since 7th edition, it'd make sense that others have fallen by the wayside. While this is understandable, it's still annoying, both for me trying to make this video and as a fan of Chaos in general. I really like how Warhammer has so many side factions and examples for you to choose for your army, or to use as inspiration for your own custom faction. It makes the galaxy feel so much more fleshed out and interesting, and I'm upset that Tzeentch doesn't have as much of that as the other Chaos Gods. I also don't want this video to have just 3 examples. Ideally, I'd want it to have 9 to fit in with the sacred number of Tzeentch. So I figured it's a video on Chaos Space Marines devoted to the Changer of Ways. It's fine if it gets a little weird. The first 3 examples in this video will be the canon non-Thousand Sun Tzeentchian warbands, and then the next 3 will be minor Thousand Suns warbands that I found interesting. There are actually a ton of these. I can and probably will eventually do a full video on more of them, but for now I picked 3 to showcase. If you think that this is a betrayal of the format of this video, I understand, but I personally would rather make an interesting video than one that strictly abides by a set of arbitrary rules that I made up. For the final 3 warbands on this list, I could have just picked some more Thousand Suns Thrall bands, but I didn't want to do that. 6 of them would just be too many, especially for a video that's supposed to focus on lesser known examples for your army. I eventually decided that, since I've talked about how you can use these canon warbands as examples and inspiration for your own custom army in previous videos, I should show that off here. So I'm going to go over 3 unique custom warbands that I've created myself. I hope that you enjoy them, and if you do, please use and tweak them in any way that you'd like. The goal of these videos is to help you make an army that you enjoy, so don't feel like you have to rigidly stick to a set of rules or a template if that's not what makes you happy. Without any further ado, let's get started with a warband that has a close connection to the Thousand Suns, the Oracles of Change. Originally a Loyalist chapter known as the Lectors of Ixis, they became the Oracles of Change after an event known as the Abyssal Crusade. I have discussed this in previous videos, and I plan to do a full video on it in the future, but to summarize, in M37, a traitorous Imperial Saint managed to convince several Space Marine chapters to undertake a crusade into the Eye of Terror. As you'd expect, it ended badly, and most of the chapters involved in the crusade fell to chaos. It's unknown what caused the Lectors of Ixis to become worshippers of Tzeentch, but since their rebirth as the Oracles of Change, they've campaigned across the galaxy in the name of the Changer of Ways, while also vying with one another for power and influence within their warband. Led by the sorcerer Amadeus Volkstein, formerly an epistolary of the chapter known as Vanius, they have invaded the world of Rashad Prime and have taken part in the Nachman Rift War as well as the invasion of the Stygius sector, fighting on the planet of Mordian. A faction of the Oracles of Change also fought against the Silver Skulls on the planet of Valoris Quintus, as detailed in the book Silver Skulls Portents. They were led by a sorcerer of the Thousand Suns named Kartecha, who had joined the warband after its founding and was granted command over a portion of it. The Oracles of Change wore red armor, with gold trim and yellow 8-pointed stars of chaos painted onto it, and their symbol is a yellow star of chaos. If you wanted to create a warband that uses Thousand Sons models without being Thousand Sons themselves, the Oracles of Change are your best bet. They have a close enough relationship with the Thousand Sons that you could easily justify them using their more unique models by just saying that they're influenced by them. Even including a Magnus probably wouldn't be too big of a leap. You could say it's like joining up together for a single campaign or something. They don't really have a defined theme or combat style, so you could go in any direction that you wanted with them without any trouble. Let's move on to another former Loyalist chapter that fell to the embrace of the Lord of Change, the Scourged. Once known as the Seekers of Truth, the chapter often fought alongside the Inquisition, stamping out heresy and putting Imperial citizens, guilty and innocent alike, to the torch in order to prevent its spread. This caused Chapter Master Gallus Herodicus a great deal of distress, and he prayed to the Emperor for a means to tell when someone was lying. But Tzeentch heard the Chapter Master's prayers and decided to answer them. And, trickster god that he is, there was a catch. The Seekers of Truth were blessed with the ability to hear every lie that was spoken by man. Driven mad by the never-ending stream of deceit, the Seekers of Truth became the Scourged, determined to destroy an Imperium that they now saw as corrupted beyond salvation. In order to aid the Scourged in battle, Tzeentch has gifted them with the ability to see into the future, learning some of their enemies' plans and predicting their movements. They're also able to use the constant stream of lies they hear to their advantage, voicing them in combat to shock their foes and allowing them to gain the upper hand. The Warband has taken part in the 13th Black Crusade, as well as fighting in the War of Beasts alongside dozens of other Chaos Warbands from the Traitor Legions and beyond. They've also joined the Caradon campaign against the Forge World of Metallica, and assisted in the Thousand Sons attempt to build their own pocket empire in the Prosper and Rift War. The Scourge's color scheme is dark blue with red helmets, pauldrons, and gauntlets, and golden trim. Their symbol is a stylized white eye of Tzeentch. I really love the lore of the Scourge. I can't exactly put my finger on what it is that I love the most, but I just find it super fun and interesting. It's really great and helpful when the warbands have a concrete backstory that you can dig into and get inspiration from. You could also easily play these guys using either Chaos Space Marine or Thousand Sons rules, so they could provide a nice bit of variety for you. And on a bit of a more personal note, their color scheme is similar to one that I painted my first box of Chaos Space Marines in as a kid, so I have a sense of nostalgia when I look at them. I wish I had a photo of it to share. I'm sure it looked absolutely fantastic, and I in no way needed to thin my paints or do anything to improve. And if you wanted another army that can bridge the gap between Thousand Sons and Chaos Space Marines, this next warband is for you. The Sons of the Cyclops. The Black Legion will take on recruits from any background, so long as they swear fealty to the War Master, Abaddon the Despoiler. These recruits will often group together into sub-warbands within the Greater Legion, often being connected by a shared origin, preferred combat style, or devotion to a particular chaos god. The Sons of the Cyclops are a Tzeentchian warband within the Black Legion, primarily being made up of former members of the Thousand Sons. The smallest of the warbands devoted to an individual god, they still remain incredibly powerful and influential within the Legion due to their skills with sorcery, with their abilities as seers making them particularly valuable advisors to Abaddon. They're led by sorcerer lords such as Yithgamor the Deceiver and Zarafistan, although the Black Legion series of novels implies that these may be titles rather than individuals. Like the rest of the Black Legion, the Sons of the Cyclops fought in the 13th Black Crusade, notably taking part in the Diamor campaign, as well as in the Nachmund Rift War. If you wanted to know more about the Thousand Sons members of the Black Legion, I'd recommend the Black Legion series of novels. They're just good books, and the main character is Iskander Kaon, a Thousand Sons sorcerer and one of the founding members of the Legion. The Sons of the Cyclops primarily wear the black and gold of the Black Legion, with maybe some added blue elements to call back to their origins as Sons of Magnus the Red. If you wanted variety, the Black Legion and the Sons of the Cyclops are your best pick. You're not only starting a Thousand Sons army, you're starting an army with the potential to expand to include elements of every Chaos faction. They can be one consistent force that gives you access to everything that Chaos has to offer, which is just awesome, and I'm really glad that there is something like that that exists. And, as previously mentioned, there is also a ton of lore written on them, including some very good novels, so if you wanted more material to read on them to really help you understand them, get into them, they would be great, especially compared to a lot of other more minor warbands which have very little. The next three warbands, or thrall bands as they're called, that we will be covering are all going to be splinter factions of the Thousand Sons Legion, as previously mentioned. All of them appear in the Warzone Fenris book, as well as in the 8th edition Thousand Sons Codex. Let's start with the warband that has the closest connection to their Primarch, the Blades of Magnus. Members of the Cult of Manipulation, the Blades of Magnus decided to use their skill at plots in an attempt to save their Primarch, Magnus the Red. They hunted down demons that Magnus had made pacts with, slaying them in secret in order to break the bonds between the demons and their father. But Magnus did not approve of their work. When he discovered what they had done, he punished them by reducing them to mindless slaves, sworn directly to his will. They now act as puppets for the Crimson King, fighting solely at his discretion and on his behalf. The Blades of Magnus have taken part in the invasion of Fenris, and helped their Primarch destroy a Sisters of Silence convent on the world of Gesina, falling from the sky as a magic dust before being formed into Rubric Marines by their Primarch in order to wipe out the Sisters. The armor of the Blades of Magnus is gold with blue trim, and their pauldrons depict a black eye, the symbol of the cult of manipulation. If you wanted to build an army focused around Magnus, using him as a centerpiece, these guys would be a great pick. Their color scheme looks awesome, and I think they would look great supporting their Primarch, just surrounding him and acting and doing whatever he needs them to do. I will admit, them being completely personalityless puppets is not something I normally like in an army, but if that appeals to you, then the Blades of Magnus are right up your alley. Let's now move on to another thrall band, one that has a much more distinct personality. The Tizcan Host. The Rubric of Ahriman wrought many changes upon the Astartes of the Thousand Suns Legion, and the Tizcan Host are no exception. Since the rubric was cast, the sorcerers of the Warband all believe that they have been reborn as avenging angels, pure and superior to all around them. Despite this perceived purity, they are a bloodthirsty warband, believing it is their sworn duty to destroy the enemies of their Primarch. The Tizcan Host call the Zongors that accompany them the Choir of Eagles, a term that goes back to the auxiliaries of the Great Crusade, although their current cries are far more grotesque. They also call their rubric the Serapha, perceiving their stillness and silence as stoic loyalty instead of the emptiness that it truly is. Like the other thrall bands, the Tizcan Host took part in the invasion of Fenris. Their colors are described as white with gold trim, although all of their art depicts them with a light blue instead of white. Their symbol is a golden crown, known as the Horned Crown, from an ancient god of Prospero known as the King of All Angels. I feel like the Tizcan Host have a ton of kit bash potential, what with their angelic delusions and all that. Stealing Blood Angels or swooping Hawksbits would be really fun. There's a ton that you could do with them. Also, if you prefer a more direct play style with a lot more heavy firepower, these guys seem like they would fit right into that. If I was to make an army of them, I'd definitely go with the white and gold color scheme that's described rather than the blue and gold one that's shown. I feel like it's way more unique and striking and definitely looks more angelic, and I do not know why the art doesn't depict it. Although if you want a striking color scheme, this final thrall band really has that one down. The Silver Suns. Exiled from the Legion for aiding in the Rubric of Ahriman, the Silver Suns have become seekers of precious metals with certain magical properties throughout the galaxy, killing any who stand between them and their goals. Once they have these materials, they will then use them to create twisted demon engines, using them to acquire future materials in a vicious, brutal cycle. For a minor Thousand Suns thrall band, the Silver Suns have been surprisingly active. They took part in the invasion of Fenris like the others, but have also fought against many Xenos races. In an assault on the Necron-Nephrek dynasty, the enchantments they put on their Mauler fiends prevented the Necron's necrodermis from forming correctly, instead coalescing into a twisted ball of limbs and body parts after their defeat. Under the command of exalted sorcerer Aminek's Soul Rend, the Silver Suns also attacked the Tau Sept world of Daketh, trying to retrieve a scepter made of rare Viridium crystals that was being held in an Earthcast research base. However, due to the stiff resistance of the Firecast warriors in battlesuits, the conflict is still ongoing. The Silver Suns have blue armor with silver trim, and their symbol is a yellow marking of the Thousand Suns Cult of Time. If you wanted to make use of a lot of demon engines, and possibly the new Sekitar robots, the Silver Suns would be a good choice for your warband. They also appear to commonly go up against Xenos forces, so they might work well if you're in a playgroup with a lot of Xenos armies, especially Tau since the war in Daketh still rages on. These final 3 warbands are going to be the custom Tzeentchian ones that I created. I really hope that you enjoy them. Let's begin with a warband from one of the 9 original Traitor Legions, the Unforeseen. Every member of the Alpha Legion knows the value in planning for unexpected occurrences. The Unforeseen strive to be those occurrences. Led by the Sorcerer Lord Verhov, the Unforeseen are a warband of the Alpha Legion that believe in testing their fellow sons of Alfarius. Feeling that only the cleverest and most prepared should succeed, they will assault other Alpha Legion warbands, attacking during the most crucial stages of their plans, sometimes ruining decades of hard work. Although, as the Unforeseen would say, it was not hard enough if they were caught unprepared. Many Alpha Legion Chaos Lords have started incorporating the Unforeseen into their plans, and keeping a paranoid eye out for their dropships, which is exactly what the Unforeseen would wish. The warband makes heavy use of sorcerers and Tzeentchian demons, which Lord Verhov maintains is solely to ensure that they can carry out their mission. However, he has begun to rely heavily on chaotic artifacts, using them to predict the movements of other Alpha Legion warbands. He's committed significant resources to acquiring more of them, and even bargaining with greater Demons of Tzeentch for information on their locations, leaving other members of the Unforeseen to worry that they will soon fall further under the sway of the Changer of Ways. For their colors, you could go with any Alpha Legion scheme. There is a lot of variety there. I am partial to the green one though. I think it would help them stand out, especially when so many Tzeentchian warbands are blue. The Unforeseen were really fun to make. I enjoy the 40k Alpha Legion a lot, especially seeing how far they've fallen from their original high-minded ideals. I also think that they work really well with Tzeentch, and I was surprised that there really weren't more Tzeentchian Alpha Legion warbands that already existed, and I wanted to give them a bit of a connection to demons so that way you could use them in your army if you so choose, especially since that demons are being incorporated more into the god-marked Chaos Legions. For this next warband, I decided to go in a more unique direction for the followers of Tzeentch and incorporate some different, more unique elements. The Bloodless Legion. Throughout the millennia, many sons of Sanguinius have tried to find a cure for the Black Rage and the Red Thirst, the twin flaws that afflict their bloodline. Well, most of this work is done by the sanguinary priests. The librarians of the Blood Angels and their descendants have also attempted to find a psychic cure for their curse. Epistolary Ferrator of the Angels in Carmine was one such librarian. He struggled in research for decades, always feeling like the truth was just out of his grasp. But when he heard the tale of Brother Calistarius being buried alive, conquering the Black Rage, and being reborn as Mephiston on Armageddon, he was inspired. Death, it seemed, is the cure, and if he could conquer death, then he could conquer the curse. He began experimenting, both on himself and his fallen brothers, delving into dark and powerful magics in order to accomplish his goal. When he was discovered, his brothers attempted to slay him. In his desperation, he swore his soul to the god of change, and was granted the ability to bring his fallen brothers back from the dead as mindless, rotting puppets, using them to effect his escape. Ferrator has since created the Bloodless Legion, gathering other renegade descendants of the Blood Angels to his banner, training other psychers on how to raise the dead, and creating a shambling horde of undead humans and Astartes, as well as other, fouler creations, to scour the galaxy for more information on how to overcome the Black Rage and Red Thirst. Ferrator and the sorcerers under his command have had some measure of success in combating their flaw, being able to suppress their thirst for blood and sustain themselves with warp energy, at the cost of becoming shriveled, twisted monstrosities. Ferrator is convinced that he is closing in on a breakthrough, although it seems unlikely that Tzeentch, always unwilling to give up an amusing pawn, will ever allow him to succeed. The Bloodless Legion wear dark blue armor with tarnished gold trim and red accents. I didn't really have a good symbol for them, but if you have any ideas for that in the comments, please feel free to let me know. With this warband, I wanted to introduce some undead elements that Tzeentch doesn't typically get, and also bring in some vampiric flavor, taking a lot of inspiration from the Warhammer Fantasy vampire counts alongside the more traditional Dracula and Nosferatu. You could make use of a lot of Blood Angels and Soulblight Gravelord bits in this, maybe even use some Nurgle bits as well to really make your Marines feel like the Walking Dead. And if your friend picked the Blood Angels or one of their descendants as their army, you could do a cool rivalry with them. For this final warband, I took a lot of inspiration from another group on this list, as well as some previous warbands that I've covered in other videos, and it may have ended up being my favorite one of them all. The Gnawing Blades. Formerly a chapter of Space Marines known as the Golden Wardens, they were obsessed with the preservation of knowledge after their homeworld lost much of their own and fell into a dark age. Led by their chapter master, Cassius Fell, the whole chapter was deployed to the planet of Biliotan 4, home to a massive archive of data for the whole segmentum, in order to defend it from an Orc Waaagh. The Golden Wardens took up a defensive position around the archive, but were soon forced back by the overwhelming force of the Orcs. Retreating with the scribes into the archive's undercroft, they watched in horror as the ancient tomes and scrolls were destroyed by the brutal Xenos. Desperate to preserve what lore they could, Cassius Fell ordered the Golden Wardens to devour the surviving scribes, using the omophagio organ every Space Marine has, in order to preserve their knowledge. After continuing to hold out for several weeks, the Golden Wardens were at last relieved by other Imperial forces on the planet. But once they discovered what the Wardens had done to the scribes, they cursed them as traitors and attacked. The Wardens fled into the Eye of Terror, and in their bitterness changed their name to the Gnawing Blades and swore themselves to Tzeentch, for he appreciated knowledge at any cost. The Gnawing Blades attack repositories of lore and seek out skilled experts across the galaxy. They focus on melee combat, trying to defeat their opponents quickly to get to the fun part, the after-battle feast. Their peculiar appetite causes increased rates of mutation, spawndom, and indigestion. Even other Gnawing Blades are not safe, as dead or seriously wounded Marines are often devoured by their brothers after the battle. They are still led by Cassius Fell, who has since ascended to a demon prince. He is a massive, intimidating figure, blind but covered in hundreds of mouths that whisper the knowledge of those he has consumed and warn him of incoming attacks on the battlefield. The Gnawing Blade's armor is white with red trim, and their symbol is a red-fanged maw, in the same style as the Flesh Eaters. These guys may be my favorite warband that I've made. I took some influence from the stories of the Scourged and the Corpus Brethren from the Slaanesh video, both of whom I really like, but I wanted to give the Gnawing Blades a more active role in their fall. I think that's more interesting than them being tricked or just cursed. I also thought it'd be fun to have a more melee-focused Tzeentch warband. We don't really have a ton of those, and I think melee is cool, so it's good to have options for that. So that's all the warbands of Tzeentch. I really enjoyed all of them, and it was super fun making new ones for this video. Let me know which one was your favorite in the comments. I still wish that Tzeentch had more unique warbands, but the great thing about Warhammer is that if you want an army to exist, the game gives you the tools to create it and make it exactly how you'd want it. It's a very flexible setting, and that's what makes it so fun. I will be doing more of these videos on Undivided Warbands, as well as Space Marine Successor chapters. Since there are so many Undivided Warbands, I'll probably divide them into smaller videos to make it more manageable, so look forward to seeing those. I think for my next video I'll do something with Xenos, just to have a little break from all the Marines. I hope that this video helped you decide on what to do for your Thousand Sons army, or introduced you to a fun warband that you'd never seen before. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video, it really helps the channel. For now, thank you and have a great day. Bye.